It is October 2001, and the eve of the invasion of Afghanistan. The fate of countries was at stake, but on everyone's lips in the Palace of Westminster was the fate of one woman, the tough Fleet Street journalist Dr. Yvonne Ridley. Yvonne tells me the inside story about her 11-day captivity in the hands of the Taliban. She went on to convert to Islam and was nominated as a Nobel Peace Laureate for her work in defending Muslim women victims of torture in Syria. Turkish Tea Talk with Alex Salmond on TRT World. Dr. Yvonne Ridley, I want to take you back to September of 2001, late September. The Western world is preparing to invade Afghanistan in the aftermath of 9/11, but you decide on a one-woman preemptive invasion from Pakistan. What on earth were you thinking about?
It wasn't an invasion. I was after an exclusive.
You were a journalist?
I was the chief reporter of the Sunday Express, and I wanted to find out what life was like for people living under the Taliban. Very few people knew about the Taliban other than what Tony Blair and George Bush were telling us.
So you donned a suitable disguise, got interpreters, guides, and you moved into Afghanistan from Pakistan.
Yes, I was wearing the all-enveloping burqa and crossed through no man's land, passed through a Taliban checkpoint. I was across on someone's travel papers. I didn't have my own papers, and nobody asked me anything. I just walked through.
So how long was it before you were discovered?
It was 2 days, and my disguise had worked very well. Nobody knew I was a Westerner. Even at the point I was captured, nobody knew I was a Westerner. But yes, I'd fulfilled the job that I wanted to do.
You were speaking to the ordinary people of Afghanistan about their situation.
Yes, because that's where the best stories come from ordinary people. They were able to tell me quite a few things that the politicians couldn't.
And then how exactly were you discovered? Was it an accident, just bad luck?
It was a farce. I was on the back of a donkey which bolted, and during this, people were scattering left, right and centre, and I was screaming, wearing this burqa. The wind was catching the flaps of the burqa, making the animal even more scared. The donkey stopped by a Taliban soldier and threw me off, and I went up into the air and just crashed down.
And what did that expose the camera or some piece of equipment, did it?
Well, the camera, which was the only piece of equipment I'd taken in, was exposed through the folds of my burqa.
I mean, we're laughing about the process of farce by which you were discovered, but of course, what a laughing matter then, because then you were in the hands of the Taliban. So what happened to you then?
Once they realised I was a Westerner, I was taken away and to Jalalabad, which is where their intelligence headquarters was. And I was interrogated there for 6 days before I was then moved to a prison in Kabul, the capital.
So, I mean, they obviously would suspect, not unreasonably, that you were a spy. They wouldn't expect you were a Sunday Express chief reporter. So they would think the journalism was a cover story and actually you were spying on them.
Well, they'd never heard a Geordie accent.
But you better, for our international audience, you'll have to explain what a Geordie accent is.
It's an accent that people in the northeast of England have, quite a distinct accent. And as I said to them, we don't all talk like the Queen.
The late Queen, Queen Elizabeth.
The late Queen. They thought that I was trying to disguise an American accent.
So you were taken into captivity, you were interrogated. I mean, that couldn't have been a pleasant experience.
It wasn't pleasant, it was terrifying, but it wasn't unpleasant. They didn't get out electrodes or whips or threaten me in any way.
So they didn't use any of the CIA techniques?
No, I wasn't waterboarded. They asked the same questions time and time again and asked me to write them down, and were obviously seeing if I knew the story, which I did because I was telling the truth.
They were trying to catch you out. Now, you decided on a very interesting technique, you know, captured by the Taliban, being interrogated, but you decided on a kind of assertive response. So what was your reasoning behind being rude to your captors?
Well, I'd bought all the propaganda that this was the most evil, brutal regime in the world. They hated women. I thought it's only a matter of time before I'm going to be killed. And so I had nothing to lose. On the grounds you don't kiss the hand that slaps you, I decided to be the prisoner from hell.
So you were the prisoner from hell. What does that mean? What did you actually do? Did you sort of fling your foot at them? What were you up to?
I threw things at them. I spat at them. And I was abusive. I used strong language, I wouldn't call it bad language.
But your Geordie accent, they probably didn't understand you anyway.
Well, the translator understood Urdu, Pashto and English, and he said to me, "These people terrify me. They should terrify you. Please be more respectful." I think he was worried that the messenger was going to be shot.
So after a few days of interrogation, you're taken to a second location.
Yes, I was told that I was going to be released, and instead I was taken to the grimmest third world prison you could imagine, which was in Kabul, and I was there for the next 4 days.
In isolation, in this grim prison in Kabul, did you have any awareness that you were becoming, at that stage, the most famous woman in the world? Certainly the most famous prisoner in the world. Were you hoping that the outside world were going to come and rescue you, or did you just think you were going to get taken out and be stoned, or what?
I expected to be executed, without a doubt, and I expected to be stoned. All these things were going through my mind because I'd bought into the propaganda about these people.
And then your interpreter, as I read in your book, came in to see you and said, "Look, you've got a very important visitor."
That was the scariest time. Because I'm saying, "Who is this visitor?" He said, "He's very important and you must be respectful." And I said, "Well, who is it?" You know, Mullah Omar, the Taliban spiritual leader, Osama bin Laden. And I'm thinking, oh gosh, you know, just my luck to get the interview everybody wants and then they'll kill me. And he just said, "Just please be respectful." And so 15 minutes later, there was a knock on my door. Although I was the prisoner, I had the key. And I opened the door, and there was this man who made my blood run cold. For 6 days, I had avoided talking about religion. And there in front of me was this religious cleric in an immaculate ivory gown, quite a large ivory turban. And there was something else about him, something that I found quite disturbing. he had a light on his face, but the light was shining out of him rather than in.
And so he was questioning you further about your own religious beliefs? Or?
Yes, he opened up with saying, "What religion are you?" And I just thought, oh, here we go. And I said, "I'm a Christian." And he surprised me then, because he then said, "What sort of Christian? Are you a Protestant or a Catholic?" He then asked me what I thought about Islam. Well, in truth, I knew very little about Islam, and what I did know turned out to be wholly incorrect anyway. And I said, "Islam?" I said, "Oh, it's a beautiful religion." And I went off in praise of this faith that I knew nothing about.
And you felt he was testing you, so he then went on to ask you the key question.
Oh, he said, because I'd praised Islam so much, he said, "So, you would like to convert?" And I thought, oh, inwardly I'm thinking, you idiot, you've put yourself into a position where if you say yes, he'll say, "You insincere, fickle woman, take her away and have her stoned." If I say no, he'll say, "How dare you insult Islam, take her away and have her stoned." So I'm thinking, I've left myself nowhere to maneuver. And then this little light bulb came on, and I said, "I can't make such a life-changing decision in prison, but if you let me go, I promise I'll read your holy book, I'll study Islam."
Well, that was a brilliant reply. That light bulb, maybe it saved your life, who knows? So, what were you, after that interview, did you think, was there a glimmer of light? Did you have hope at that stage that perhaps you would be released?
Well, I was told 15 minutes later, "You're going home on a red crescent plane." And I punched the air and thought, that showed him.
And were you nicer to your captives after that?
No. No, because rather than sending me home on a red crescent plane, they put me into the terrorist wing of this awful prison in Kabul.
You had become an international celebrity. You were top of the news. Your plight is a great human interest story on the eve of war. And then on the 8th of October 2001, across here, Prime Minister Tony Blair triumphantly announces your release from captivity. So at what stage were you then taken across the equivalent of Checkpoint Charlie and brought back to the coalition forces? What exactly happened?
On the morning of the war, the 7th of October, they drove me down from Kabul to the border again, and they told me, "You're being released on humanitarian grounds." However, the spiritual leader, Mullah Omar, had said, "Do not hand her over only to the British." And the Brits didn't turn up for me. They were supposed to come in a helicopter past the Khyber Pass and pick me up and collect me. And I'm sitting there waiting, and of course the war had started. So people weren't that pleased about Westerners in their midst anyway. And the diplomat who was with me in the end made the decision after a couple of hours to hand me over, because he thought that there was going to be a riot, because people were furious. We've just been bombed and now you're letting that American G.I. Jane go. And I was picked up by the Pakistan military.
So Tony Blair didn't mention, because I was in that debate in the House of Commons, that the helicopter hadn't turned up. He missed out that detail. So you were released, and of course there was huge interest in your release. Obviously the question would be asked, and I suspect the international media would have expected you to denounce your captors after the experience you had, but that's not how it turned out. So what was going through your mind when you were asked the obvious questions? Were you brutalised? Were you treated badly? Were you, etc.? What did you say?
I thought about it in this 15-second process of walking through no man's land, and all the Pakistani media were there and they were shouting, "How did the Taliban treat you?" And I thought, right, now's my chance to get back at these awful people. And I just thought, actually, they were pretty decent. So I told the truth, and I've never been forgiven for it since.
If you denounced the Taliban and all its works and said they were dreadful people and you'd been brutalised horribly, I mean, that would have been a better ending to the story than you coming out and saying, well, actually, as being in prison and incarceration goes, it wasn't too bad, and actually I was rather rude to them.
Yes, they were absolutely furious. My car was mobbed by my colleagues. One of the Daily Mirror reporters grabbed the car keys from the ignition and immobilised the car, while a couple of others from Fleet Street tried to physically drag me out of the car because I had become a story. I was with a colleague by this time from Express newspapers who was pulling me back in because he was trying to protect his exclusive story.
In your book, In the Hands of the Taliban, because what the Taliban were trying to find out, weren't they, is whether you were a Western spy disguising your American accent, or you were a bona fide journalist. And when they were satisfied you were a bona fide journalist, they released you. But in your book, you suggested that other forces were at work trying to present you as something else in the hope that you'd be executed.
Well, you have to remember the climate at the time. Bush and Blair were determined to go to war in Afghanistan. You can't drop bombs on nice people. So they spent 20-odd days demonising the Taliban, and they did it so effectively, it's still there today, that sort of legacy. And one thing that would have really sealed it for them was if I had come back in a body bag.
So it was a life-transforming experience. I mean, you invaded Afghanistan, as I put it, as a hard-bitten Fleet Street journalist. You came out quite differently, with a different perspective on life entirely. And indeed, you held to your commitment that you'd given to the holy man to study Islam.
Yes, I just thought, how can I write with any authority about Muslims when I know nothing? You know, we saw that over the weeks in Gaza, where their faith got the Palestinians through a lot of the horrific things that they've had to endure. But so I started studying Islam. And what was an academic exercise very soon turned into a spiritual journey. I've always been, as my family described me, a God botherer.
Which means somebody who's interested in the Almighty, yeah?
Yes, I've always had this core belief in God, always, from as young as, you know, when knee high. And I was fascinated when I started reading about Islam, because it is so similar in so many ways to Christianity.
And you said something in your writing about embracing a family, that you found in your conversion process to Islam that you were embracing a world family. Can you explain that?
Yes, well, once it became public that I was showing an interest in Islam, all sorts of people were coming up to me wanting me to convert and explaining about the brotherhood, the sisterhood, and when I did convert to Islam, I said, I have joined the biggest and the best family in the world. And I really felt that, and it doesn't matter which country I go to in the Muslim world, I am always treated with such respect and love, especially from those who know my story.
Now, Yvonne Ridley, you weren't quite finished with celebrity. I mean, you were voted the most famous Muslim woman in the world, but also appeared in a feature film, or were played in a feature film, which concerned official secrets, wasn't it? They concerned the release of information by the civil servant Catherine Gunn, who passed that information to you. I remember the film, Keira Knightley was in the star. You know, who played you again?
I was played by Hetty Morahan.
I could get you a copy.
You're asking me to collude in a breach of the Official Secrets Act. Some call that treason.
The truth is, Alex, the story behind the story is far, far more interesting. Catherine Gunn was the originator of the leak, and she gave it to a friend who to this very day has remained secret. And I've protected her identity all these years, and she was also a GCHQ worker. But the three of us could so easily have ended up in prison.
Well, that would have been a great achievement, to be in prison and with the Taliban and then subsequently with the British authorities. But that was an extraordinary episode because eventually Catherine Gunn, the case against her was dropped. Dropped exactly because at the point, the whole exposure of the misleading legal advice, the presentation of spurious arguments for the war in Iraq was going to be laid bare for the public to see.
Well, I think certainly the anti-war movement knew that there was lies and treachery and deceit on a scale of which no one could have imagined to get into Iraq. And I think that one single act of misleading people was the start of the rot in that place back there. And, you know, giants used to walk into that place. And now I just see political pygmies.
Reflecting on this extraordinary experience, it's now 20 and more years ago, but so many things from it reverberate now. What is your key lesson looking back on your experience and the light it shines on world affairs?
I think I've become really disillusioned with the mainstream media, and to listen to politicians today talking about events in the Middle East, and they are either deliberately misleading or they have no idea of what is going on in the Middle East. And the frightening thing is, I think it's the latter. Foreign secretaries in the past used to be great statesmen. They had these jobs for years and years and years. And yet, again, down the road, I've run out of how many prime ministers there've been, and there'll be another one later this year. And I just despair at the way our politics has been devalued and degraded by outside forces.
Yvonne, you've spoken about the portrayal of the international affairs in the mainstream media. Does that also extend to the way that Islam and its treatment of women is portrayed? Do you think that is misleading as well?
Absolutely. A lot of people said to me when I converted to Islam, why on earth did you want to become a second-class citizen? And this is the Western attitude towards women in Islam. It's not the Muslim men. The people who have the problem with Muslim women are these men with white saviour complex who think that we all need rescuing. Whereas if they really knew what Muslim women were like, you know, they would step back and show a little bit more respect. But Muslim women, they are the backbone of the community, and they're incredibly strong.
One final thought. Prime Minister Tony Blair celebrated your release in front of the House of Commons, opening his speech by the... have you any sort of message in 20 years distance for Tony Blair and how he might change his attitude to things?
Show some humility and tell the truth.
Well, let's hope Sir Anthony Blair is listening. Now, it's been a great pleasure, and we're not going to send you away empty-handed, Yvonne, so we have your very own Turkish tea set.
Oh, that's wonderful. Can I have a sneak peek?
Yeah, of course you can. Open it up, open it up.
Oh, it is. It's beautiful.
It's absolutely fantastic. But thank you so much, Dr. Yvonne Ridley, for joining me in Turkish Tea Talk with Alex Salmond.
Well, thank you.